Does the magic of the FA Cup still exist?
Yeah. But there was nobody like, oh, this is the home of tennis. No one ever said that about any venue that was used. So you can shift that because there's no sentimental home.
Or is Arteta right to stick to his guns and he wants to play with his false nine and maybe he's kind of too good to have an old school number 9, as you've alluded to in the past? Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 29, I believe, with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson. Ollie, lots to go through this week. I want to talk about the worst week of Mikel Arteta's career. I want to talk about Ruben Amorim on Manchester United. I want to talk golf. I want to talk Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic, are one of the most unusual partnerships in sport, and plenty more besides. Oh, and also the Spanish Super Cup final being played in Saudi Arabia. Very much interested me this week as well. But Ollie, let's start by you giving me a one-word answer. Does the magic of the FA Cup still exist?
Yeah.
That was the right tonality. It was the right word, but equally the right tonality.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's good, but it's also like, doesn't the whole weekend feel like we're clinging on to the magic of the FA Cup? We get, it gets pushed down your throat that it's the third round and it's the best round of the FA Cup aside from the final, and this is amazing. And it's like, yeah, cool. I get it, but you don't have to tell me that it's magic. Let it be magic. And unfortunately, there's not enough magic around the FA Cup for you to go, oh, wow, I can clearly see it's magic. Somebody has to go, no, look at the magic. Look at it over here. That's magic.
By its very definition, magic shouldn't be forced, like it just is. The minute you feel like someone's telling you it's magic, it sort of ceases to be magic. And I think there's a lot of that with the FA Cup. I don't know whether you were watching the Tamworth Spurs game, Ollie, but just before kickoff, and it was on. I was working in an office, and it was on in the background on a Sunday morning, and there was a problem with the net. So it's like they hadn't correctly fastened the top of the net to the crossbar, and honestly, the commentators were collapsing over each other to tell us how this embodied the magic of the FA Cup, rather than just being either poor administration or someone is trying to be funny because you know the cameras are on you. You've had 10 checks before the game. So, like, how did that happen? Does it happen because you want that to happen? So the cameras are there and the game gets delayed by 10 minutes. But honestly, the commentators were just, this is what the FA Cup's all about. Is it? Is it just because the crossbar on the net wasn't fastened correctly? I don't know.
Dave Windsor wants to the line, instead of the magic of the FA Cup, the magic of somebody losing their job for not putting a net up properly before the FA Cup. That's what he wants. Someone's going to be getting their P45 this afternoon. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But is it just that in previous decades, the B squad or the second 11 was quite weak from the top side? So they had a first choice 11, and then their B side was weaker, so the opportunity for upset was higher. Plus, players weren't as professional as they are now, so the opportunity for them to kind of take it a bit easier, be a bit more complacent, get a bit ruffled by bad weather or dodgy pitches or crap changing rooms was higher. And now it's just like there just aren't really any upsets. And I'm sorry, but like a championship side beating a Premier League side at home, I don't know. I'm referring to Plymouth and Brentford. Like, I don't know if that's like the biggest upset ever.
No. I mean, for a proper cup
I'd
upset,
have been away. I can't remember. But
you need to be a League 2 or League 1 side knocking off a mid-table Premier League side. Like, that's a notable cup upset. Or you need to be a non-league side knocking off a championship side or something like that. Like, the non-league sides can do what they want. If they get a result, that's incredible, and that's awesome for them. And the point is really for them to get in the hat for the draw for the next round, to be able to get a big side, to be able to cash in and have some game-changing money for the club at some point. But there's still something great about this weekend as well, though, isn't there? I mean, you can, without it being forced down your throat, you can appreciate that it's great to see, Spurs playing at dodgy Tamworth, that it looks right funny. As a football aesthetic. It looks right for the FA Cup. I mean, it does bring a bit of nostalgia back. I just fear that because it's not even to do with the second 11s and stuff. I think it's more of a case of, because teams don't care about the FA Cup, big sides don't really care about the FA Cup until quarter-final, semi-final. It's very difficult for your day-to-day football fan to get drawn into the magic of the cup when you know that there are a lot of sides in that competition that aren't fussed about what happens at this point. And that is what takes off some of the magic. It would be magical if Tottenham played Tamworth and you knew that Ange Postecoglou cared so much so that he would play a first 11 or as good as a first 11 against a Tamworth or someone like that. And then Tamworth take them to extra time. That would be magic. The magic isn't quite as that if you know that Postecoglou's going, well, got a bloody League Cup semi-final in the bag already. We can get to Wembley that
Ollie
way.
Wilson impression hour is in session, folks.
Ange is a great one to do because you just do a drab Australian accent.
He's one of my favourite Premier League characters. Honestly, in my lifetime, I find him so funny and so fascinating. And I don't know why, but it's so hard to take an angry Aussie seriously. Just that accent is just so difficult to take very seriously. He's obviously a very serious man, which just doesn't help. The Tamworth Tottenham thing, by the way, I did find something quite funny. When the Tottenham players get off the bus and go through, obviously this does happen in Premier League grounds, but not to the same extent. So the fans are so tight to where the players walk off the bus and into the changing room, and they're just heckling these the Tottenham players as they go through, all kind of just about above board, and it's very funny because all the Tottenham fans, you just can't escape it when it's that close.
I mean, did you care? Like, did you go into this weekend thinking, "Oh, FA Cup's third round weekend, like this is quality," or was it? It's another weekend of football.
I didn't think there was anything in the draw that really stood out for me, and that's in the lap of the gods as well, isn't it? I do. Yeah, no, there was nothing that jumped out. I mean, had there been the Tamworth Tottenham, it was fun. Like, I watched it was fun. And I tell you what, like, Tamworth had a chance at the end of the 90 minutes. It was kind of a half chance. But if that goes in, that is one of the biggest upsets in recent FA Cup history. So, you're always a kick of the football away from something crazy happening. But when it doesn't, it just feels like a bit of a letdown.
I mean, I was with some mates on Friday, and one of them didn't even know it was the FA Cup this weekend. And like, they're football fans, not like, season ticket holder, go to every game, but very much they were like, oh, that's why there's no Premier League this weekend. It's the FA Cup, and that's kind of what it's become, I think, and that's the shame, really. It's the sad thing about it.
Let's talk about the worst week in Mikel Arteta's managerial career, Ollie. Drop points against Brighton, or the worst 8 days. Drop points against Brighton. 2-0 defeat at home against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. I don't think they're turning that round at St James's Park. And then you get knocked out the FA Cup against Manchester United. And I think Mikel Arteta's had a bumpy season. But overall, he's had a really, really good 5 years in terms of the trajectory of the football club, in terms of every season they've got more points than the last last 5 Premier League seasons. But that is a bad week for Mikel Arteta, because Mikel Arteta is a coach who, more than almost anyone else in the Premier League, I think, needs a trophy this season. And to get knocked out of one cup competition, to be on the brink of another, just puts enormous pressure on the second half of the season. It puts enormous pressure on Mikel Arteta to win the Premier League, which if Arsenal are going to do, they're going to have to win almost every Premier League game, or they're going to have to do something historic that the club's never done in their history and win the Champions League. So, a bad one that for Mikel Arteta, I think. A really bad one, actually. Newcastle, Manchester United, they shouldn't. This week should not have happened.
I wouldn't say this week shouldn't have happened. I think the manner of the defeat to Newcastle was surprising, because Newcastle were the better side for the majority of that game, for an hour out of the 90 at least. And losing 2-0 at home and getting done. I mean, but you got to say Newcastle got the best player in English football right now, in Alexander Isak, Dave. So,
hello. Someone's changed the tune. Fans of Not Another Sports Pod, feel free to go on our YouTube channel and look back on a clip a couple of months ago where Mr. Ollie Wilson is sighing in disbelief that I could value Isak at 100 million British pounds.
I sigh in disbelief still to this day. But in terms of informed centre forwards, you got to argue it. But no, in all seriousness, like, Newcastle were very good against Arsenal. that was tough. I think losing to United, and having just said that I don't think there's a lot of teams that care about the FA Cup at this point, that Arsenal-Man U game felt like a mid-90s Arsenal against United sort of game. There was intensity. There was an atmosphere, which is obviously fairly rare at the Emirates. There was... I mean, Newcastle-Arsenal this week, 80th minute. There's no chance of Arsenal rallying in that game because the Emirates is almost empty. The number of people that had left before the end, when in a cup tie like that, even one goal is a huge difference maker. There's no atmosphere for anybody to get behind on that field. Like
the margins was so slim as well, Ollie, this week, because Martinelli hits the post against Newcastle. I think it was at 0-0, 1-0 down, can't remember. If he scores that, even if they lose the game 2-1, I'd say they're still right in the Carabao Cup, but it's just the 2-0 going to St James's is so tough. And against Man United, I mean, they had loads of chances, and they go out on a shootout. Ollie, Arsenal create so much, and their defence is so good. This is obviously not an original thing to say Arsenal need a striker. But my question to you would be, why has Mikel Arteta not bought a striker? And it's not all on Mikel Arteta. He's not the one conducting the transfers. And I know that Edu, the sporting director, recently left, which doesn't make it easy to get a new sporting director in and sign a striker in January. But in the summer, Ollie, and these are all good players and good signings. They signed David Raya for 30 million from Brentford, right? They signed Calafiori, who cost 42 million from Bologna, and Marino from Real Sociedad for 32 million. Now, they did need a goalkeeper, but let's take the other two. You know, that's over, what is it, only over 70 million quid. I mean, you can go out and buy a striker for 70 million quid. And they didn't. And, you know, we've talked about Osimhen or Tony or Isak and Watkins. I mean, there are strikers out there that if you put 70 million on the table for a football club, you will get a striker in. Is it as simple as Arsenal haven't signed a striker, or is Arteta right to stick to his guns and he wants to play with his false nine and maybe he's kind of too good to have an old school number 9, as you've alluded to in the past?
I mean, it's just a case of Arsenal are filling in the gaps that they should have filled in 5 years ago, bringing in holding midfielders, defenders, etc. And now the glaring... But the trouble is that... unless you're top of the league and everything's going great, people are always going to say, oh, you need this, or oh, you need that. And you'll find the holes that somebody needs. Whereas I wouldn't say I admire it, but I'm not against Arteta going, no, I think we have enough quality going forward in this side to be able to find the goals that we can to win, particularly when we're considered the best defence on paper in the Premier League. We shouldn't be conceding that many, and we should need 1 or 2 goals a game to find 3 points quite comfortably in the end. And there is enough firepower to do that. I mean, if it's finding a player that gets in form, that's the big difference. You know, if Arsenal have any one of their front line suddenly starts firing in a goal every other game, things look dramatically different. But that form hasn't come either this season. And then
is he just unlucky, Ollie? Is he an unlucky coach in the sense that Saka, your best player, gets injured? You know, that if that happens to any club, if that happens to Mo Salah, if that happens, that's a problem. He's also unlucky in the sense that when Arsenal have peaked, their peak's been here, but Manchester City's peak's just been slightly above them for the last, couple of years. And that's kind of unfortunate in terms of the timing and trajectory of your football club. Is he just and Arsenal fans don't want to hear this, they want trophies, but is Arteta an unlucky manager?
No one is unlucky. The idea of having luck in the game means that there is no luck about whether you are lucky or unlucky, so to speak. You know, you don't really get a choice in it. It's not something that is on him as a characteristic. So I don't want to necessarily say he is an unlucky manager, but it is a tough period to be. We've discussed the consistency of Manchester City finding 90 plus points or whatever a season. You know, that's what you need to do, and that is a new extreme level to be trying to chase as a football club like Arsenal when you have huge financial backing still, but it's not the same money as a PSG or a Manchester City or anything like that. And yeah, look, as I say, another 6 goals a season somewhere for Arsenal over the last couple of years, and they're lifting a Premier League trophy. So that's just the way that football rolls sometimes, and you can't really do anything about it. I don't want to say it's luck, it's just that's sport, isn't it? Things can't go your way, and you can't buy and solve everything. And that's the great thing about sport, is that not everything can be predicted and not every gap can be filled in without something else cropping up. So it's hard luck, but it's not unlucky Arteta. It's just great sport at the end of the day. It's unpredictable.
Ruben Amorim, Ollie, got a point at Anfield and then knocks Arsenal out of the FA Cup. I remember about 10 days ago saying to you that he was potentially staring down the barrel of losing against Liverpool, losing against Arsenal, and then going into a home game against Southampton, which he needed to save his job. But Ruben Amorim's kind of avoided that fate, seemingly. He looks, Ollie, he looks and talks like a man who will win trophies with Manchester United. Like, that's what he looks like. That's the package of Ruben Amorim. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But that's what it looks like. I mean, it's a good job he's pretty, I think, because I think that probably gets him. I think it helps him. I do.
Looks will get you everywhere, Windsor. Like it's an unfair advantage in the world if you are a handsome man, particularly a handsome foreign man like Ruben Amorim. Yeah, but credit to him this week. I mean, we said after the draw against Liverpool could be a bit of a false dawn. I did feel against Liverpool, as I said last week, that this was a United side that were at least now understanding what Amorim was trying to do. And I tell you what, getting through in the FA Cup on penalties in a game like that against Arsenal, it doesn't matter that it's the FA Cup. It's the down to 10 men, the rallying spirit, the dogged defensive duties, which were United defended so well. Last-ditch defending on a number of occasions, but were very good defensively in the end to hold off Arsenal. And I think that sort of victory will give Amorim, that gives him something to hang on to in terms of carving out a dressing room unity more than anything else. And that's really important for United because that's something that hasn't been there. The dressing room culture has been off, as a lot of people say. But if you can go to the Emirates and have a victory like that on penalties, down to 10 men, everything's going against you and you still find a way through against a big side, that's huge for Amorim and the confidence that he's trying to instill in this side, for them to buy into his methodology and to then walk away with a dressing room that's just got a little bit more chemistry to it as well. I mean, Harry Maguire was fantastic during that game. If you needed a defender somewhere, Maguire was stepping into the role, right place, right time, every time. And I know he takes a lot of grief, but that was one of those performances where you go, yeah, you can see why United spent the money on someone like him. He's not Virgil van Dijk, but he is a very good defender on his day.
Ollie, the Spanish Super Cup, which is a 4-team tournament it's merged into, where the winner and the runner-up of the Copa del Rey and the first and second place in the league, I think, play each other in this 4-team tournament. And the final, last night, took place between Real Madrid and Barcelona of the Spanish Super Cup, which is, I guess, our Community Shield. Now, the final took place in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, and it has done since 2019. My question for you is this, Ollie. 10 years ago, this would have been seen as completely unthinkable. Now Saudi Arabia are hosting the Spanish Super Cup. As we know, and as we've talked about in Not Another Sports Pod, this is part of Saudi's bigger expansion into sport. Heavyweight boxing, live golf, the WTA finals, the Italian Super Cup. I think there's some UFC. Everything is building towards the World Cup in 2034. Saudi Arabia's participation in hosting sporting events is not going anywhere. It's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we can delve into the reasons behind that if you want. But my question would be, how long before we see a La Liga game played in Saudi Arabia? How long before we see an El Clásico La Liga game played in Saudi Arabia? Because this is testing the water. You know, this is the La Liga hierarchy testing the water of playing the Spanish Super Cup final, which ended up being the El Clásico in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So if that can happen, then the logical next step is for a La Liga El Clásico game to be played in Saudi Arabia. I'm not saying I like it or dislike it, it's good or bad, but that is what I believe will happen before the 2034 World Cup, probably before the end of the decade.
I mean, it will happen at some point, but football's still too tough to move around in the same way that we've seen the US sports kind of doing, I think, which is weird because obviously I think because things like the number of games that are played now, there's a very intense schedule. There's so many midweek games, European competitions, etc. as well, means that it's more difficult to fly off to Saudi Arabia for a weekend, come back to a European game and not say that it's not affecting you. The difference is baseball's an odd one for me because we bring back that to the UK and that seems to be okay. But for something like the NFL, which is the one that has moved first and foremost regular season games to another country, that's easier. You've got a set structure of a week. The teams get an option of having the week off the following week. So it kind of works in that sense. Whereas, yeah, it's going
to happen, Ollie. Like, it's going to happen. And I guess my question, my kind of thoughts on this is that people say, well, why doesn't it happen to the Premier League? The Premier League right now does not need Saudi Arabia. It's a global product that sells itself anyway. The Community Shield will not be played in Saudi Arabia. It can be played at Wembley. You still get the global eyeballs on it. The Premier League is a global product that can be hosted in where it's hosted at the moment. It doesn't need it. La Liga, and I would argue Serie A, actually need Saudi Arabia because they don't have the same global product that the Premier League does. So that is why I think La Liga and Serie A will be neck and neck to see who hosts a game in Saudi first. The reason I think it'll be La Liga, not Serie A, is because, well, La Liga fans, they don't travel, right? There's no away, there's no culture, there's no history of traveling away to follow your club in Spain. So I think you'll get less kickback in that way. And I just think the fans would kind of tolerate it a little bit more, would just kind of meekly accept it. If both El Clásico games, instead of being played at home, would be played in Saudi Arabia. I can see it.
I cannot see Spanish football supporters abiding in an El Clásico. I can understand
the Super Cup El Clásico is played there, Ollie.
The Super Cup is like but it kind of is. You described it as being like, the Spanish Charity Shield, and if the Charity Shield left Wembley, no one would really bat an eyelid. It wouldn't be like, if the Charity Shield was played in Saudi, that would be a talking point. It would be far less a talking point than a Premier League game or the FA Cup or League Cup final or something like that going. And the same way, like the things like the Spanish Super Cup, the Italian Super Cup have been so bastardized now as competitions because, as you mentioned, it's a 4-team competition now. It's not winner of the Copa del Rey and winner of the league. It's not the Coppa Italia winners and the league winners. And as soon as you start messing around with that, then the meaning of that tournament's completely lost because people aren't stupid and people understand, you're just doing this to have a 4-team knockout competition so you can have more games. Like, it's very obvious. It's just done for financial reasons. The uproar around changing things like the FA Cup, even in terms of having FA Cup replays, people were so annoyed at that, at losing FA Cup replays and third round replays, for instance. But we could probably manipulate the Charity Shield without too many people being too frustrated. And I think that's what you're seeing there. And that's why it's okay, because they're still kind of perceived as, well, this is just our friendly pre-season tournament that's now moved into the middle of the season. Like, it's been moved around, it's been expanded. Fine, send it to Saudi Arabia, we don't care. But you stick the Copa del Rey final in Saudi Arabia or a Super Clásico or, whatever. People will be cheesed off by that and there would be more uproar.
What you're saying, though, doesn't really follow the trajectory of what we've seen the last 5 years, right? As in, 10 years ago, it would be, or even 5 years ago, mate, when it all started, it would be kind of unthinkable that, Live Golf or like the WTA finals, like the end of year women's tennis tournament is now played in Saudi Arabia.
People don't care about that as much as football. That's a problem.
The fans aren't the same.
Yeah, like, sure, if you took Wimbledon out of Wimbledon, you'd have a problem. If you took the Australian Open out of it, but the WTA tennis finals, the ATP finals, they have no real standing sentiment with anywhere. Like, it was kind of nice when they had that the end of the season men's tournament, like the Royal Albert Hall and stuff like that. But there was nobody like, this is the home of tennis. No one ever said that about any venue that was used. So you can shift that because there's no sentimental home to an iconic foundation of that. When you shift things that people actually care about and have a long-standing sentiment, that's when you get into trouble with fans getting cheesed off by it. And putting Real Madrid against Barcelona in the La Liga season and taking that out of a Nou Camp or the Bernabeu is something that Spanish football fans may be able to let a Super Cup go, but not that.
I mean, there's 9 years now between now, 2025, and the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia. The only thing that's going to happen in those 9 years is there's going to be more and more and more sport in Saudi Arabia, fair? This, by the way, we talked about this on Not Another Sports Book, but for our newer audience, this is because the Crown Prince is essentially trying to diversify a economy which has traditionally been very heavily reliant on oil over the last 100 years, and it's a young growing population in Saudi, and they're trying to diversify the economy, get people jobs, trying to bring Saudi Arabia onto the modern commercial stage. So that's kind of the reason for that.
And we are big fans of what Saudi are trying to do.
Man, I love what they're doing out there, and I just think that, you know, I'm a really big fan of the trajectory. It looks like a great place to work, by the way. And, you know, I've got a few gaps in the freelance calendar. So, look, there's every chance that Wilson wins. You know, do drop me an email. Yeah. So I think I just think there'll only ever be more sport in Saudi. So what do you think will, if you don't think a La Liga game will happen, what about a Getafe against Villarreal or something like that? Do you think they could sneak that into Saudi?
Yep.
Something like that.
Definitely. Something like that.
But then no one cares about that, do they?
Villarreal against Valencia. Like, there'd be some frustrated sighs from Valencia fans, from Villarreal fans. But as, a global audience wouldn't go, there's something very wrong with that. I think they still actually would, to be honest. I think there'd be a lot of people that would say that doesn't sit right with me. But that would be more acceptable than... Yeah.
What about Italian football? Did the Italians just accept that the Italian Super Cup's played in Saudi Arabia, for example? Because that Italian strike me as, and my experience of Italian football is there is an away contingent that follow their clubs. There is a greater depth and connection to the football clubs and the community. So how did that fly?
It's the Super Cup. Like, it means something, but it doesn't mean a lot of things. You know, the Coppa Italia, you get the beautiful bullseye on your shirt. The Scudetto, you get the Italian crest on your shirt. You win the Super Cup, you don't get anything. You don't get a label on your shirt or anything like that. It's just, okay, nice, well done. Because it was their pre-season tournament. All of these Super Cups were just a pre-season tournament and a piece of generic silverware. So moving it across, it just means less than it already did, and it never really meant that much. And changing it to this knockout stage competition and all that kind of stuff, like the Spanish have done with it. But Italian football wouldn't tolerate a regular game going across to Saudi Arabia or anywhere like that. It wouldn't happen.
Ooh, this is going to be Ollie Wilson's second Alexander Isak moment of the season, I wonder.
When they announce that the Milan derby is going to be played in Jeddah.
Tottenham's going to be played in Jeddah.
Look, Tamworth sign them up. They'd be desperate for that.
You're not wrong.
No frozen pitches at this time of year in Saudi Arabia. I tell you, that is one big thing. I think the thing is as well is that Saudi's caught in a tough position with something like this because they have to bring the best across because people only care about the best. People don't go to a stadium and won't go to a stadium to watch Valencia against Getafe or Cagliari against Bologna or something like that. That will be an empty arena, which is why things like boxing you can put there, have the biggest
F1
fight in the world. Yeah, Formula 1 weekend. It's a travelling circus anyway, Formula 1. That works, and it's the pinnacle of motorsport. You could only, I think, get an audience with maybe a mid-level Premier League game. A mid-level Italian, German, Spanish game.
Germany would never do it because of the club and the sort of fan ownership. But yeah, I take your point.
But no one turns up. And if no one turns up, then it's bad optics. And Saudi don't want bad optics. It's all about the optics. You need a full stadium. So it's like Messi or nothing, basically, for Saudi
Champions
Arabia.
League final.
That is more likely to happen?
I think that could happen before the 2034 World Cup. You could imagine the 2033 Champions League final, and it would be pitched as a like Saudi need to test this stadium before the World Cup and that kind of thing. I could imagine a Champions League final because it's a neutral venue anyway, so it makes sense. And that would happen, a 2032 or 2033.
3 years earlier, you'll get the Europa League or Conference League final, and then you'll get a Champions League final.
Conference League kind of makes sense because, if you're flying to Azerbaijan anyway, you may as well fly to Saudi Arabia down the road. Let's talk outside football and let's rattle through a few more sports, Ollie, in the next 20 minutes. Australian Open, Andy Murray's coaching Novak Djokovic. I honestly think one of the strangest partnerships in sport. I've actually just seen that Novak Djokovic lost the first set in his first round match as we record this podcast, would you believe? But one thing, I guess this is a fork in the road, isn't it? It is, as in Djokovic hiring Andy Murray as his coach when Andy Murray has almost zero coaching experience and, Novak Djokovic is the most decorated male tennis player of all time. It's either a genius move where Novak Djokovic is trying to eke out the final tiny percentages to get him that 25th slam, or it's kind of this wild act of desperation, like the last act from Novak Djokovic as he's desperately trying to cling on and win one more slam. As I say, he's a set down his first round match, so far it's not going well.
Or it's a great marketing ploy from Novak to keep attention and eyeballs on him.
They don't need that, though, do they?
I mean, I don't know. Tennis needs eyeballs at the end of the day anyway. So the idea of pairing two of the greats together is great for tennis. I mean, we've spoken about this on more than one occasion on this podcast about Murray Djokovic. So it keeps it in the zeitgeist at the moment of world sport talking points. It shouldn't need it during the Australian Open, that's for sure. This should be happening at like Queen's or something later on in the year down at Eastbourne or what. I don't know, Djokovic doesn't go to Eastbourne, but yeah, this is when tennis would need it. This Grand Slams are Grand Slams and they should stand alone and actually have attention on it for things like the sport as opposed to the talking points. But I still don't, I think we said this previously, I don't understand it very much aside from learning from your enemy. That's all I can see the positive being for Djokovic is him and Murray sitting down and Murray going, oh, well, I always wanted to try and manipulate this because I saw that as a weakness in your game. And Djokovic then realises, okay, I can try and eliminate that weakness. But aside from that, it just seems an odd one. Obviously, the jury will be out on what happens in this first match for Djokovic in the Open. But yeah, it's just not. I don't even know if it's really a story.
Oh, it's definitely a story.
I mean, but why? Why does it mean much? Because we've never really
hire a recently retired former rival as your coach. What would be a story, by the way? If David Moyes made Wayne Rooney his number 2 at Everton. Because David Moyes going back to Everton, sorry, we're just circling back to football now. It's kind of like, okay, I mean, okay, he was good 10 years ago, but it's kind of a lack of imagination. Everton have got this new stadium, everything's fresh and new and exciting, and you brought in David Moyes, assuming they avoid relegation, by the way. And you brought in David Moyes to be back there. And I think if you had Wayne Rooney as his number 2 or as part of his coaching staff, it would just add that little bit of modernity back to him.
Yeah, and then the writing's on the wall and Everton will be in the Championship next year. I mean, if Rooney's anywhere near a football club, it's sinking like a stone. You think he's that bad? Yeah, it's terrible. And I've heard numerous stories about him off the pitch as well, of like what it's like working with Wayne Rooney, and it doesn't. There's a very obvious reason why it doesn't work for Wazza, unfortunately, and I would step away from coaching as quickly as possible if I was Wayne Rooney. But but going back to this Djokovic Murray thing, right? It's a story for the announcement. When have we ever really cared that much about a tennis player's coach, let alone a tennis player that is arguably already the greatest of all time? We've never really thought much as the kind of generic sports fan about Djokovic and what his coaches are saying to him. Because there's almost this idea that, well, does Djokovic even need a coach at this point in most people's heads? That's how I would look at Novak Djokovic right now. Like, what is there in his career that he has not looked at already or worked out himself that he needs somebody to coach him through at this point.
I would say this, Ollie. Andy Murray beat Djokovic 11 times in his career. When you're Novak Djokovic and you've lost so few tennis matches in your entire career, I guess getting access to the brain of someone that did beat you multiple times is potentially worthwhile. As in, so few players did it. And I don't think he has a good enough relationship with Rafa Nadal or Roger Federer to ask them to be his coach. And I'm pretty sure both of them would refuse as well. But he was more friendly with Andy Murray. I guess having access to that is kind of interesting. Yeah, that would be my only. It's the kind of outside the box thinking that possibly. By the way, this is the kind of thing that if he gets knocked out in the first round, it's a disaster of a decision, and Murray never coaches him again. And if he wins the Australian Open, then he's a genius. So it's one of those, I think.
Yeah, it's a nice story. It will get the eyeballs on tennis, but I'll focus on the Australian Open when we get to the quarterfinals, whether Novak's in it or not. So
talk to us about golf, Ollie. Talk to us about this.
No, I want you.
I did watch some.
I need you to talk about this because I know
right,
I'm a golf fan, but you're the market. You are what TGL is trying to get, and that is people that don't watch golf and aren't too fussed about it.
Just explain, Ollie. Explain to the audience what it was, because I've watched clips of this, and then I'll tell you my thoughts on it.
So TGL is a venture set up by Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods, and it's kind of working in conjunction more with the PGA Tour it's the PGA's attempt to combat live without necessarily spending the money. It's that fun, edgy, different side of golf. And so what it is it's team golf played on a simulator. And they're playing courses on a simulator that are designed for this TGL Golf League competition. So they're not playing traditional courses or anything like that. They're all brand new holes that no one's ever seen before. And it's like speed golf. It's a 2-hour event indoors on a giant 60-foot simulator screen. They have real turf that they play off, either fairway, rough or sand. And they have a green that they can change the undulations on the green there and then that evening to make it different for every single hole. So no golf hole is the same, no putt is the same or anything like that. The green rotates around. It's all very kind of modern technology gimmicky. And it's done in an indoor arena with fans in there. There's music. The fans are chanting. They have the players all mic'd up so they can talk to the players during the broadcast. They kind of want the players to bring a bit of the banter and the chat and all that and show their personalities a bit, which is very difficult for a lot of golfers because quite a lot of golfers are quite just dull, focused men, which I don't think is actually a knock. I think that's something that you need to be able to be on a golf course when you're trying to win at that level. But it's kind of bringing that, I guess the kids would say, bringing the vibes for golf, right? You could almost see this event taking place. And it's the top golfers in the world that are involved in this, like top 10, top 20 golfers. Xander Schauffele, 2 majors last year. Ricky Fowler, big personality. Matt Fitzpatrick, major winner. Shane Lowry, major winner. I mean, the big names are doing these team competitions. And it's the idea of trying to latch onto the thing that people love in terms of the Ryder Cup, team golf, but without bastardizing the sport too much and taking it down a route that Liv are doing with like the party on the golf course atmosphere. And it's trying to find that happy medium where if you're into fast-paced golf, go and watch some TGL and watch some great players hitting into a very, very accurate simulator with mountains of technology. Or if you're into more traditional golf, go and watch a PGA event, go and watch a major, watch the game in that respectful manner. So they're trying to draw in that new audience. And it works. It works. So. Okay,
so first of all, when I watched it, I couldn't believe the size of the screens. Because in my head, a golf simulator is those, there's plenty in London and around the world, presumably, where you can go for like a lad's night out or girls' night out or whatever. And the kind of simulator screen is quite small. So I couldn't believe, first of all, these screens are absolutely gigantic, which is kind of impressive, right? Like, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And my first thought was, is this just a way to keep the aging stars involved in the sport? As in, is it a little bit less physically demanding, maybe, on like, you know, your Tiger Woods and people like that? You can just sort of keep them in these gimmicky events, and they can still make a bit of a show. I don't know how that takes off as a spectator. You know, you're someone that's been to a lot of golf events. Isn't half the fun like going round with a certain player to all the different holes, and like the walking, and you get your position, and there's a uniqueness to each individual moment and each individual shot, which you obviously don't have in that simulator. I mean, unless you sort of lean into the boozy darts element of it all, I don't know how that takes off. So I thought it was interesting. I mean, the big screens really fascinated me, but I didn't really get it.
I watched this with my girlfriend, and didn't force her to sit and watch it.
Is she as into sport as you are, Ollie? Because there's a few references where, like, you say, oh, you know, NFL with the girlfriend, golf with the girlfriend, football with the girl. Like, does she like sports? Obviously, she doesn't like sport as much as you, because it's impossible. But
she hates football, but NFL and golf, she will sit and kind of take on board, especially big.
And do you
moments.
mansplain everything as you go through, or do you just
No, she asks questions and all that kind of stuff, which is good. I don't mansplain. I'm not like, by the way, love, yeah, it's 4th and 1, so they need 1 yard. Yeah, it's their 4th attempt. I'm not being that guy.
But obviously, you work in the industry, Ollie. So do you take the opportunity to educate when you're watching?
Only if it's asked. I don't say like, oh, this is it. But she's really into, like, you know, she wants to know why it's a holding call in the NFL, why that flag's been thrown, what the punishment is, why is that happening, kind of thing. And it's good. Yeah, it's a nice evening on a Sunday evening watching the NFL and stuff. But we had this on. We had TGL on, and you could see, as someone who isn't a massive golf fan, you could see this working. It's like Ludwig Orber, for instance, young, great golfer, gonna be a major winner at some point. But right, he's a tall, excellent golfing, attractive young man. Like the Amorim of golf right now. Many are calling him the Amorim of golf. And there was a point where he's coming off very charismatic, and he's making like some little funny looks to the camera, a bit like Jim in The Office kind of thing. And then Sam just says to me, "Oh, I really like that hoodie that Ludwig's wearing. I think that'd be a really nice top for you to have on the golf course. I really like the colour, and the colour is in the team colour." So already you've got a attractive young man, superstar at golf, who's very good. So you're latching onto that. You're then latching onto the marketability straight away. That top is nice. That nice Adidas golf hoodie he's wearing is very modern looking, and I like the team colour. So you're already then attaching yourself to the team a little bit. And you can just see the like marketing manipulation just starting to click through on somebody. And that's kind of what it's aiming to do. It wants to bring team golf into it. So it wants you to turn up with the Bay team, or the Brooklyn whatever, or the Boston Common, or whatever they're called, attire. It's what Liv has been trying to do with the team golf. But with the difference between this and Liv is that it's all about the team. It's not about the individuals at all. This is a team sport. So while Liv has got an individual contest going on, and then I don't really still understand what's going on with the team element around it, this is quite clear cut. It's a team event. They do alternate shot for the first 10 holes, and then they do 1v1 for the next 6 holes. And it just grabs you. It's 2 hours. There's 40 seconds in between shots. No more. So it's fast-paced. You see a number of different golfers playing a number of different shots. They're still playing off difficult lies if they're in the rough or if they're in the sand. It's actually tough still for them. It kind of works as a quick-hit golf fix. But yeah, so I think this works as it's not as garish and in your face, and it does appeal to those that don't necessarily and aren't massively into their golf immediately at this point. So it's... Yeah, I was surprised how much I enjoyed it. I'm a miserable old man, Dave, as we know. I could be an absolute cynic going into this and be like, it's not bloody golf, it's rubbish. And it's just like, no, I wouldn't hunt it out, but if it's on, like, you watch it, stick it on in the background.
I wouldn't say you're a miserable old man, Ollie. There's just like a healthy layer of British cynicism, which, you know, I can counteract well enough, hopefully. So yeah, I think when it doesn't work is when I'm also negative, and then it's then it's a downward Victor Meldrew spiral. But yeah, I think it's fine as it is.
But yeah, so I think that could work, could really work. It's nothing's as good as the NFL playoffs, though, Dave. It's just not. It's the best.